Hi everyone, welcome to Wheel of Mind, the Wheel of Time point of view reread podcast. This season we're reading Nynaeve Almira's points of view. Welcome to Season 3, Episode 15. I'm your co-host, Tel'aran'rhiod of the White Aja.
Hi, and I'm Giskel Cimaris, a scholar from Ilion. For any new listeners to our series, I want to let you know that the Wheel of Mind is an in-depth character reread podcast, so we will drop random spoilers just often without any type of warning. So this is your spoiler warning. Please read the series before listening to this podcast, unless you don't mind spoilers. Now today we're examining The Fires of Heaven, chapters 54 and 55. Now I'll get us started with chapter 54. Now, To Camelin opens at first with a Rand point of view, and just to let you know where we are in the story, he just takes an army of his Aiel via his skimming platform to Camelin to attack Ravine. And this is where we get that sickening image of one of the Aiel falling off the skimming platform. So, again, not a fun, memorable scene, but one that always sticks with me. But starting with Nynaeve's point of view, she's in Tel'aran'rhiod trying to train Siwan. Siwan was having trouble, just like most beginners here, in maintaining her clothing. Nynaeve had to maintain enough anger to channel into the Tel'aran'rhiod that was keeping her there, and yet still had to keep a civil tone. That was a pretty tough balance. You see, that attitude had landed her in hot water, literally washing pots at the kitchens, with the other Aes Sedai whom she had also been training. Siwan got to use the twisted stone ring, since that's the only way she could get into Tel'aran'rhiod. Siwan blamed Nynaeve's bad mood on Theodrin, who had been working, trying to help Nynaeve break her block. Nynaeve replied with some gossip she had heard about Siwan throwing General Gareth Bryn's boots at him, and in just a moment the two women were rolling in the dirt, hitting, kicking, pulling hair. It's a cool catfight. The fight ended when Siwan began laughing at themselves, and Nynaeve had to admit to herself that she was acting foolish, just like a man. Then Nynaeve glimpsed a face in a window, and fearing that it was Moghedien, she forced Siwan out of Tel'aran'rhiod. She herself jumped away to the town of Jireen, a small place she had only visited once for a short time, and one which she knew they had never mentioned anywhere that Moghedien could overhear. It was someplace safe. Nynaeve sat down and began playing with weaves of fire, disappointed that all of her channeling was so weak when she was here in Tel'aran'rhiod using this Ter'angreal. She was as weak as most of the novices right here and now. She despaired of going back, because she knew that she would have to admit to the Aes Sedai that she had been giving private lessons. But she had to admit it, because she knew Moghedien was there somewhere stalking her. She just knew it. Then Nynaeve jumped to her feet, because Moghedien spoke to her. There the woman was, standing in the street, dressed all in black, mocking her. Nynaeve tried to weave spirit and cut Moghedien off from the source, but her weaves were so weak that the Forsaken just shredded them like they were cobwebs. Contemptuously, the Forsaken began weaves of her own, and hinted that she was about to deal with Nynaeve Almira for the last time. And this is a direct quote. "Hold, Moghedien!" Brigitta shouted. End quote. Yes, impossibly, it was Brigitta. There she was in Tel'aran'rhiod. Moghedien was so shocked that she dropped her weaves, but recovered quickly enough to evaporate the arrow that Brigitta fired at her. Then the archer was lifted up, and Moghedien began taunting her too. Nynaeve briefly considered leaving Tel'aran'rhiod to get some help, but instead began crawling on her hands and knees toward Moghedien, begging for her life. Brigitta had been transformed into a little girl, barely older than a toddler, who was playing with a toy bow. Still begging, Nynaeve crawled closer and closer until suddenly she imagined an Adom stretched between them, with the bracelet on her wrist and the collar around Moghedien's throat. It worked! She could feel the Forsaken there in the back of her mind. She felt the rage and the horror welling up from the woman. Nynaeve had to use all of her strength of will to keep the Adom there in place, as Moghedien kept trying to will it away. The thing quivered, until Nynaeve made her stop with thoughts of black wasp nettles on the woman's skin. It took a couple more examples before Moghedien stopped struggling against the Adam and agreed to turn Brigida back as she was. After some discussion, Brigida explained that she had put on the twisted stone ring and went to sleep as soon as she realized that Siwan was out of Tel'aran'rhiod, but that Nynaeve was not. She had sensed Nynaeve and arrived just in time, but without a plan. She believed that if she could have distracted Moghedien for just a moment, that Nynaeve would come up with something. It didn't even bother her when Nynaeve admitted that her first thought was to run away back to the real world. They pressed Moghedien for information, but she did her best to only drop hints until Nynaeve finally got angry with her. Then she did let them know that Ravine, Samael, and Grendel had cooked up a scheme to bait Rand into attacking Samael. When he did, all three of them would be waiting for him. After some more threats which Nynaeve herself did not believe she could do. Could she kill even one of the Forsaken in cold blood? But after a few more threats, Moghedien admitted that Rand was, right then, already attacking Ravine instead of Samael, but he still might be walking into a trap. Brigida chose that inopportune moment to wake up, leaving Tel'aran'rhiod. Nynaeve growled some threats to Moghedien, letting her know that whatever happened to the leash holder, it was amplified into the collared woman, sometimes tenfold. So she had better work hard to keep Nynaeve safe. They were going to Camlin. She didn't know what they could do in Tel'aran'rhiod that would help Rand in the real world, but she was going to figure it out.
There are, the action really ramped up in this chapter after we've had nothing happening in the girl storyline for a while. We did have a battle just an episode or two ago that Nynaeve was, vomiting about and stuff, but even then, the storyline of theirs was still boring. It's like, what is the point of this? Where are we going? What's happening?
Yes.
And we still had no sign that we knew of so far of Moghedien. Now, at this point, the reader still wouldn't know who Moghedien is or exactly how Nynaeve figured out she's in Saladar and narrowed down who it might be, but we're going to very, very soon.
Yes,
yes. But besides all of that, where we're going and how this fits into Nynaeve's larger story that felt like it was kind of sluggish, at least for me throughout this book, I do think there's a few funny moments. When Nynaeve is criticizing Siwan in her head for wiping dirt off of her face when, you can just will yourself to look however you want in Tel'aran'rhiod. At that moment, Nynaeve herself was braiding her hair manually. Until she thought that and then stopped, and by the time Siwan got up and looked at her, her braid was already finished and her clothes were changed and stuff like that.
Yes. Not a spot of dirt on her.
No.
And I could see that just being something reflexive that you would do. You'd stand up and begin brushing dirt off of you. But, she is still somewhat new at Tel'aran'rhiod as well, so... But she doesn't want to admit that. She wants to act like she holds all of the cards, and that really upsets her in dealing with the Aes Sedai. Now, much of that is happening off page, so to speak, but she's looking back on the times that she has been there with the Aes Sedai, giving them lessons, and even though she knows much more about it than they do, they still treat her like an accepted, which she is, and they're not going to in any way treat her as an equal. And Nynaeve's a little bitter about that.
Yeah.
Now,
I thought...
go ahead.
Oh.
No,
Sorry.
I was going to say one thing about the same thing, too. She had begun fussing at Siwan because Siwan couldn't keep her clothing stabilized, which is a very difficult thing to do in Tel'aran'rhiod for a beginner because it's those subconscious thoughts, not the things you're dwelling on the forefront of your mind, but sometimes your emotions and those thoughts in the back of your mind that we create a lot of those changes in Tel'aran'rhiod, and you have to learn to kind of quiet your mind. And she really struggles with it. She struggled with that terribly early on, in some very funny ways. And to see her fussing at Siwan for it it's a little bit hypocritical. But again, you got to remember, she has to maintain a certain level of anger so that she can channel.
True.
Yes. So once she's a little bit angry, she's not going to act reasonable. Now,
Mm-mm.
Nynaeve can be a very reasonable woman, but not when she's angry. She's going to criticize when she should not, and she's going to criticize everything. So
Yeah.
I can see that Siwan would get a belly full of it very quickly.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But I always kind of forget that Nynaeve is so used to having to keep herself angry to channel now that she knows that that's her block. So sometimes I'm like, wow, she's being really, hypocritical, unreasonable, obtuse, whatever. But she kind of has to be. You can reason yourself out of anger if you really let yourself. At least I'm that way. I can always kind of explain away the reason somebody did something to hurt me, like, oh, they didn't really mean it, or oh, these were their circumstances or motivations or whatever, or oh, what would I do if I was in their shoes now that I know the rest of the context.
Yeah.
Nynaeve, first of all, isn't the type of person who really lets herself do that very well anyway. So I guess she's good at working with her block. But I personally, that would be a difficult block for me because I think I would have a hard time sustaining the anger because I'm pretty good at talking myself out of being mad.
Right.
I guess to help me move on. It's like I don't
Right.
want to stay upset, so I find a way to just make sense of what's happening so I can just get on with my day.
Yes, exactly. I mean, you get angry, but you don't have to dwell there constantly. But in order to channel, Nynaeve has to dwell there quite often.
Yeah.
And in seeing the Amerlin's clothes change, it came 2 or 3 times to where she was wearing the stole, the Amerlin stole. I keep calling her the Amerlin here. Siwan.
Yeah.
She's not the Amerlin.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess the trailers poisoned our brains. We can't unsee her being Arlen now, right?
Right, exactly. But it's so bittersweet to me because that's a part of her identity. Still, even if she knows that she's not the Amerlin, that she never will be again, she cannot channel. She has no hopes and dreams of ever channeling. In fact, she is trying to, as a blue would do, have some cause or something to keep her focused so she doesn't fall into depression and die like so many women do. And again, we've discussed how the Aes Sedai just feel like that's almost proper. It's something you should do. Almost like ritual suicide in some cultures when you've lost honor. Not quite to that level, but it's close. Once you've lost your ability to channel, to most Aes Sedai, you have lost your value or your worth. So she has really stayed focused to be able to maintain the will to live and to do things and be productive. And now here she keeps subconsciously somewhere still thinking of herself or identifying with herself as being the Amerlin because she has been for a number of years.
Yeah.
And that's, it's almost voyeuristic to when you see that. You almost want to turn away and give her a moment,
Yeah.
It really, I see it as bittersweet because to me, she still should be the Amerlin. And that's one of the things that I never really liked about the story was the deposing of Siwan. I understand, where it led us to, and we had to see things change. But I liked her. I liked her character. And I didn't want to see bad things happen to her. But, it is an integral part of the story. But there's many things about the story that I don't like, yet it's part of the story, so I don't try to change it.
Yeah. There's a couple of ways that Nynaeve is pretty clever in both of these chapters. One of these is her really quick thinking to force Siwan out of the world of dreams. And her quick thinking in general, when she thinks she's glimpsed Moghedien, she thinks about, okay, Moghedien can't know that I saw her, so I've got to act quickly and I've got to act, really under the radar. So she rips Siwan out of Tel'aran'rhiod by pulling the Tel'aran'rhiod away from her before she even thinks about the consequences of what that does.
Right.
Which
yes.
I understand. I feel like I would have just been caught like blubbering with like Siwan next to me and told her like wake up, or and try to do something to get her out of there. I wouldn't have thought of grabbing the Tel'aran'rhiod. And the fact that she thought herself to Jareen and then realized all the reasons that it kept her safe. The fact that she did all of that deduction on an unconscious level is really impressive. So she's just really clever in general, and we're going to see that cleverness again in the next chapter too.
Right, right. Again, another one of those lines of similarity between she and Matt Cawthon, where she made the decision by taking an action. Um,
Yes.
yes. And what you said about the not knowing the consequences of taking the stone ring away from Siwan and forcing her to leave Tel'aran'rhiod that way. In my personal reread, I'm in The Dragon Reborn again, where not Nynaeve, oh my goodness, Egwene has just gotten the stone ring and has used it the first couple of times, and um, the first time she visited the Stone of Tyr, or the Heart of the Stone there in Tel'aran'rhiod, she met the old woman Sylvie, who basically cast Egwene out of Tel'aran'rhiod the same way. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we know that to be one of the Forsaken in disguise later, but yeah, she kicked Egwene out, and there were no repercussions, no bad things. So I guess
Mm.
again we just have this poor communication. Egwene never
Yes.
told her, or Nynaeve didn't remember because she did it, and then worried about, wow, what did that do? Did that send her to another place? Does it make her wake up? I mean, would it have killed her? She just didn't know.
Yeah.
She just took an action to save Siwan, not knowing what the consequences of that action was. Um, oh my goodness, there was another parallel there between The Dragon Reborn and this that I've forgotten. I had it in my mind a minute ago, but um, I got off topic. I apologize, but you're right. It
That's
was
all
very
right.
quick thinking of her to jump to Jareen. It's not a town that I remembered from the story.
No.
And she even said it's someplace they stopped basically before they ever ran into Moghedien. So it would have been before they ever got to Tanchico.
Mm.
And it's something they've ever talked about. So as far as she knows, that's a safe place. Now, again, this shows some of the things that she does not know about Tel'aran'rhiod. We
Mm-hmm.
learn later from Perrin that he can sense where someone else jumped to. He
Ah,
learns that from the
yeah, yeah.
wolves, and then he uses it to follow Slayer and others. So there are ways to do that. But we learn from Brigitta, when Brigitta says, "Oh yeah, I took the ring from Swan, and drank the last dregs of that concoction you had, so I could go to sleep." And I felt that there were two people here. No, how'd she say it? I knew there were two people who realized they were in Tel'aran'rhiod. And so she deduced that one of them would be Nynaeve, the other would be Moghedien.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess when you're in tune enough with Tel'aran'rhiod, you can tell when someone is there intentionally and when they're there just dreaming themselves in for a moment. And since she could sense two people there, she just zeroed in on them, which is the only time I remember it being described that way in the books. I think earlier when they were when Moghedien was living in Tel'aran'rhiod, or dead in Tel'aran'rhiod, however you want to say it, and Nynaeve visited there, that Brigitte said something about you can tell by an awareness, almost like a pulse given off from someone. So, and I took that to be someone who was a channeler, but evidently not. You can uh, tell, you can feel when someone's there intentionally. And so, yeah, she was able to know, even though she didn't know where Jareen was. This was not a world or a country that she was really that familiar with in this present day and time, but she knew how to find people who were in Tel'aran'rhiod. So, as good as Moghedien is at this, Brigitta is probably better. So I don't know why she didn't use the Twisted Stone Ring more often. It seems like she could have really trained them better than the wise ones, better than anyone else, but they didn't think to use Brigitta that way.
No, I think that's strange, but maybe just a part to help conceal her identity too.
Ah,
And to
yes,
keep her
yes.
away from Moghedien. There's no reason she needed to come in there again anymore. Maybe that's. I don't actually know. It seems like a lot of these pieces are sort of like, it needed to happen for the plot. I don't know.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
probably other reasons. I don't know if we have enough information to know. But speaking of Brigitta, Nynaeve seems to be very much over her really annoying guilt towards Brigitta. I know we've seen that peel away and kind of dissipate over the last few
Right,
episodes, but I
right.
think by this point, the fact that she even considered leaving her to go jump out of Tel'aran'rhiod and go get help shows that she she's really moved on from that.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad to see that.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I mean, shows some growth with her. And the fact that she would admit it later was, I feel like, very mature of her as well, because she's very good at not admitting things she doesn't want people to know about her. Things that she thinks or intends that, later she just kind of keeps silent about it. But again, that shows that level of maturity and trust with Brigitte, that she can tell her, well, I've started to leave you here. I was going to try to go get help, knowing there's no help you can get, really, or none that we're aware of. If she had gotten 3 or 4 of the Aes Sedai and convinced them to come into Tel'aran'rhiod, Moghedien would have been finished with Brigitte long before then, and there's no way that that Nynaeve could have rescued her. So she did the right thing. And as much as I despise the Seanchan's Adom and what it does and how it's used, I love this moment in the book when she wills that collar into place. It's one of those things that the first time I read it, it just took me by surprise. I'm like, oh, no, she didn't. And every time I'm anticipating it so much, when she starts crawling and begging, I'm like, oh, yes, here it comes. I'm so ready for this. I don't know, it's one of those things that I just really enjoy seeing the underdog win. Seeing someone come up and give Moghedien a little bit of punishment. I started to say what she deserves. I don't know that anyone deserves being collared, but this is a form of penance or punishment for her that we see is a temporary thing now. It becomes a little more permanent much later on. But you feel like in a world that is focused on balance, this is a little bit of that balance that, she's probably getting what she deserves, whether it's good or bad. Moghedien's getting something she probably deserves, because Lord knows she has done so many terrible things to so many people that just controlling her for a short time is a fairly just punishment. But either way, even if it wasn't, I still love that moment.
It's still satisfying for sure. And I think it is probably for Nynaeve too, and she doesn't really think about it until later. Right. About, what does this make me if I'm doing this? Or how do I stop from becoming her? And I think the reader is kind of meant to take that same journey. Like, maybe you get satisfied by it here, and then later you think about, what does that say about me? Is that really justice? Or, I find myself wanting bad things to happen to this person. Am I comfortable with the things I'm imagining being satisfied by? And that type of stuff. I like the amount of introspection that these types of situations can give the reader.
Yeah, when she even asks herself, could I really kill one of the Forsaken in cold blood? Again, head-to-head battle when you're fighting for your life and it's self-defense. I think she could have done it. She possibly could have done it back in Tanchico if she'd had to, but she found a way out of it. Because Nynaeve is just not someone who wants to commit murder, even when she's angry. But we'll get into that a little more in the next chapter. But I do like that she stops and thinks about this and asks herself that question, because we all oftentimes would think, well, I would do this in a certain situation, or I would do that. And oftentimes we don't know what we would do, but it's good, it's healthy to stop and ask yourself, what are the consequences of this decision? Where's that going to take me? And we'll look at that a little more in your chapter. This is all I have on chapter 54, unless you have other things to say.
Nope, I'm ready for my summary of chapter 55 called The Threads Burn. And this chapter has Rand and Nynaeve perspectives interleaved, so I am summarizing all of them because just the Nynaeve ones by themselves would be pretty short and wouldn't make a lot of sense without the Rand ones. So we begin by finding Rand chasing Ravine through the royal palace in Caemlyn, following him through a gateway into a reflection of that same location, where he found he was able to affect parts of the environment at will. Nynaeve dragged Moghedien through Tel'aran'rhiod to the same reflection of the palace, dodging weaves that the men threw at each other. Moghedien warned her that to be here in the flesh, as the men were, gave them so much more power than they themselves could wield, and it made them incredibly dangerous. The Forsaken tried to refuse to go further, but Nynaeve forced her with punishment through the Adom. Rand had stepped through a trap of a gateway, it turns out, and he felt saidin slipping from his grasp, and himself slipping away as Lews Therin threatened to take over fully, modifying his appearance. Once he gained some control over this illusion, he felt he only had power for one more great strike at Rahvin, so he yelled to try to draw him out. Nynaeve felt the palace shake from the men's destructive weaves, and she began gathering all of her strength that she could pull through Moghedien. Through the Adom, she felt the Forsaken's fear turn into resignation. They would certainly die here. But then Nynaeve channeled to set the whole room on fire with a single flame, engulfing Rahvin, distracting him from his attacks on Rand. This gave a confused Rand just enough leeway to balefire the Forsaken. After Rahvin disappeared, Nynaeve ran to Rand and healed him of his wounds, telling him to leave this place as long as being here in the flesh would cause him to lose parts of himself. He didn't seem worried about that, though. And he also passed on a message from Lan saying he's too dangerous to be loved and he has moved on to someone else. The message seemed to bounce off of an incredulous Nynaeve, but Rand continued. He himself was the same, and he wanted Nynaeve to tell Elaine that he was too dangerous to love. He then left Tel'aran'rhiod, leaving Nynaeve alone to figure out what to do with Moghedien. She decided to force her to drink forkroot tea so she could still be controlled in the waking world. Moghedien complied, and as the Forsaken was weakening from the tea, Nynaeve told her how she had deduced her location. Nynaeve would be seeing her soon in Saladar. And thus ends Chapter 55, The Threads Burn.
Okay. So, Collard being totally under Nynaeve's control, the only advice that Moghedien seems to want to give her is, we've got to leave. Just leave Tel'aran'rhiod. Get out of here. There's nothing we can do. Just as you'd kind of expect out of one of the Forsaken, her greatest loyalty is to herself. The Forsaken have no friendship with each other. She really doesn't care whether Rand kills Rahvin or Rahvin kills Rand. Moghedien doesn't. That is of no concern to her whatsoever. As great a dedication as she has to the Great Lord, the Dark Lord, her greatest fealty is to herself. She's gonna have self-preservation number one, and they've called her the Spider, one who hides in the shadows and waits, and I guess this really shows that part of her personality. That's the only thing she'll tell Nynaeve. She could explain how to use Tel'aran'rhiod. She could have given Nynaeve hints of quit trying to use the power, use Tel'aran'rhiod itself. But she does none of that. The only advice she gives her is get out of here and go. And Nynaeve does punish her sometimes, but not. She doesn't really press her for information. She's wanting to save Rand, and that is Nynaeve's overriding loyalty here, not to herself. I mean, even though these two are so balanced in the power, you see the huge division between who Moghedien is as a person and who Nynaeve is as a person, that Nynaeve's greatest loyalty right now is to her friend. And she's willing to die. She's willing to die and take Moghedien with her if that will save Rand. So I love seeing the disparity of their attitudes here, the wide gulf between these two women, and how Moghedien doesn't really have a choice but to go along with her. But rather than giving Nynaeve tips that would help them, her only thought is to run. But Nynaeve's is too. It's just Nynaeve's is to run into danger to save Rand. And I love that about her.
Yeah, she is incredibly loyal to Rand in a way that nobody else really is. Everybody else, well, I guess Elaine is probably the only other one. But hers is out of love, even though they've not spent that much time together. It's
Right.
it's one of those that's always a little bit harder to buy for me.
Yes, yes. At this point in the story, it's still more of a teen infatuation. Yet,
Yeah.
You're right. She's very, very loyal to him, but Nynaeve much more so than Egwene. And Egwene had spent several
Very
years
much.
thinking she was going to marry Rand, and her accepted tests are all about Rand, and so you'd think she would have this great loyalty to him, but Egwene's loyalty shifts to the Tower.
Well, yeah, I mean, in her accepted test, she had to reject him. She had to leave him all of those times, and she did.
All three times.
That's what she did to be kind of sealed to the Tower.
Right. And Nynaeve's, were very different, yet, here that core of who she is just does not change. She left the Two Rivers to rescue these 4 children, and she still holds on to a core of that whenever she has the opportunity. And in fact, I think, in spite of the message Rand tells her at the end, that Lan says, well, not that he's moved on to someone else. I think it was something else.
Yeah.
You've got to forget about him, move on with your life. Send the same message to Elaine that just I'm not worth loving. Turn your back on me. I believe in a sense Nynaeve becomes more dedicated to Rand after that, because she sees how much more he needs her. He's not just he's not gotten spoiled and gotten it to his head that he's a king, but there's something much deeper here, and he needs rescuing. And Nynaeve is one of the few people who are still willing to do that. A lot of people are willing to be there with Rand to follow him, but not many people are willing to rescue him at the expense of their own lives if necessary. But Nynaeve, that has never changed with her. She's still willing to do that.
Yeah.
And I say Moiraine too, although she's not in the story at this point in time, but she's one that would give herself and as far as we know did give her life to save Rand. Yet at the same time, from the very first, would kill him if that kept him away from the Dark One. So she had a little different focus there, but she was someone who was still. Who cared about Rand, but Nynaeve loved him like a sister would love a brother, and or almost a parent to a child, and that never changed about it. I like that. Some things we see about Nynaeve too. She's very sympathetic toward people who are injured. Again, in the Dragon Reborn, when she first meets Aviendha, one of the maidens of the spear there with Aviendha is terribly wounded. And they ask, Aes Sedai, can you heal this woman? And I love how Nynaeve has to get so angry. She's kneeling there on the ground beside this injured Aiel, and she's pounding her fist into her leg, and so upset that people would dare use a sword and tear flesh this way, making herself angry enough to channel. So she's very sympathetic toward anyone who is injured, and she wants to heal. She wants to help. But she's not in the least bit sympathetic to, let's say, people paying for their own crimes or their own mistakes. She's fine with that. So, I'll give you a quote here of when she's in Tel'aran'rhiod with Moghedien. Quote, "Well, trying to unfasten that collar when it was around your neck was its own punishment. At least Moghedien did not have anything left in her stomach this time." End quote. That was her only sympathy as well. Thank God I didn't have to watch her throw up this time. It was just the dry heaves. I mean, just no
she's
compassion
really
whatsoever.
Unsympathetic.
Right.
No,
right.
It's interesting what she decides to do with Moghedien, though. I mean, it's she's already sort of sneaking around with her. She's like, I can't let Rand see this Adom. Whatever's going on here is mine and Moghedien's business alone. And then she decides too, when she decides I can't just kill her, she pretty much immediately rules out taking her to the Tower to face appropriate justice too. So
Right.
Nynaeve kind of reflects on her experience as a wisdom when she she thinks about how somebody dispenses justice. And she thought about that during her fight with Swan, too, when she got all embarrassed about it. Oh, what would the women's circle do about something like this? What would I do about something like this? But she's continuing to think about her role as an arbiter of justice once she has captured Moghedien. And interestingly, she decides to maintain that role, even though she's not, according to, being an accepted of the tower, she doesn't have that authority. And she's already hiding it. So she's getting a little shady about it.
Yes.
Already. And a lot of people jokingly call this her being a war criminal. She's taken this prisoner of war and she's not following any of the appropriate, accepted things you're supposed to do with one of them.
I never thought of that. Yeah.
Now begins Nynaeve's war criminal arc. Things get a little dark. The fact that she just keeps this ancient person prisoner to be able to tell her all kinds of secrets. I mean, it's useful to bargain with her, and none of us, I think, really question the utility of the information that Nynaeve and Elaine get from her, but it's still, I don't know, really messed up. It seems like it violates the Geneva Conventions or something. There's something about this that's not right.
Yeah, and they don't have the Geneva Convention, but they do have some expectations of conduct of war, and she's not following that either. Right. Mm-hmm. She's not following any of that. And you're right, it did morph into, well, let's get information out of her and let's learn what we can learn, from this vast storehouse of knowledge. Just try to learn good things from her, things we can turn to the good. But it began with her unwilling to kill Moghedien. She thought about it. She questioned that in the last chapter when they were still in Jareen. And then once they have, distracted Ravine and Rand kills Ravine, when Rand walks up the stairs and he says, I thought that was you, then, Nynaeve thinks about it. All I've got to do is tell him. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but all I've got to do is tell him who this is. He will destroy her. And she was unwilling to do that either, because that would have felt like blood on her hands. And the thing is, Rand would have done it without compulsion at all. He wouldn't have hesitated.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He may still be hung up on this not wanting to kill women thing.
Yeah,
but after seeing what that got him at the docks just a few hours before, I doubt that would have held him back at this point. Because he still thinks that Avienda and Matt are still dead. I mean, he still thinks Elaine's mother has been killed by Ravine. I think he has hardened himself to the point he probably would have killed Moghedien. But Nynaeve doesn't stop and dwell on the crimes that Moghedien has done, the thousands of people that she's tortured and killed, just sometimes for a whim, for unknowable reasons, just because she's evil. She doesn't focus on any of that. She focuses on, who am I? Can I do this? Can I be responsible for her death, either directly or even indirectly by pushing the responsibility of killing her off on Rand? And she's not willing to do that. It's sort of like the way of the leaf, that violence damages me. Doing violence to someone else damages me and my soul. Yeah. And Nynaeve just can't bring herself to do that. Neither could she, get Rand to do that, because that would damage him. He's already broken enough, she sees here, and he doesn't need that. He doesn't need more of that on his conscience or on his soul. So I like that about her, and she doesn't think of it that way. I'm not even sure if she's aware of the way of the leaf, the way that Egwene and Perrin are.
Right.
But it seems to almost fall in line with those beliefs. I can't do it. It has nothing to do with whether or not this woman deserves it. It has to do with whether or not I can be that kind of person, and I can't. And I really like that about her, that it's not what can I get away with, but what would that do to me? And she just doesn't want to be that kind of person. So I don't know. I admire that about her. I wish more people had that perspective, that you don't have to be a complete pacifist like the Tuatha'an, but you can still realize that violence against other people damages you and hurts you. And I think it really does. That's one of the things that really caught my attention the first time through this series, that point of view from the Tuatha'an, is that, violence, it hurts the perpetrator as well as the victims.
And our heroes always argue things like, well, you have to fight against Trollocs and Fades and stuff, but the Tuatha'an are still not wrong that also hurts you to have to do those things. So I think they do take a very extreme form that wouldn't work if the entire world were to do that. The Trollocs would overrun everybody, but the fact that they're just a small group who does this makes it a little more sustainable, I guess.
Right. And as you said, they're still not wrong. And they've carried that down for over 3,000 years from a group of pacifists who served the Aes Sedai and were following the way of the Leaf back then. So,
because even if the creatures you're hurting are bad, I mean, we see how our heroes, like Rand, still experience so much anguish over the things they have to do, or how dark his mind gets when he tries to cut himself off from feeling about the things that he thinks he has to do. Or has to do, rather.
Yes. We see that damage in him more than we do many of the other characters, much more than Matt or much more than Perrin, but we see that psychological trauma to Rand. Now, again, I'm not saying I'm a complete pacifist. I think there are times to engage in self-defense or even defense of others, the weak and the innocent. But at the same time, understanding even that action is traumatizing to me, and it does damage that will never really heal. Thankfully, I've never really had to engage in that. I've never found a fight I couldn't talk my way out of or walk away from. But I hope to keep it that way the remainder of my life. But if ever forced into a situation where I had to defend someone else, life or death, I think I would bear the scars of that the rest of my life, just as anyone does, whether they want to admit it or not. So I believe in that from the way of the Leaf, that we do bear trauma from that can't really be healed. Yet I'm not a complete pacifist, but I still think they're right in that viewpoint. That's just some of the things that I love about this moral dilemma that she finds herself in, yet she comes out on the good side of it, on the right side of it. She makes the right choices. Now, again, later she just justifies keeping Moghedien prisoner, which she probably should not have. I think turning her over to the Tower probably would have been the correct thing to do. I really do. Let the Aes Sedai pump her for information and then execute her or still her or whatever they're going to do. But don't just keep her prisoner. I still think the Adom is just a horrible thing. But it's what our girls did, and it helped give them the superpowers they needed to survive and to win the last battle. So it worked out in the end, even though I don't think that was the right decision. But to preserve Moghedien's life at this point as an individual, yes, that was the right thing to do.
And it goes to show how the pattern seems to be neither good nor evil. It seems to require certain things to happen, and however we get there is just how we get there. That's how the events unfold. And that's something Moiraine explains to Perrin early on in The Dragon Reborn. But I think that's one way that we can look at all these pieces that seem to have to fall into place, even though they really make us uncomfortable sometimes.
Yes.
And speaking more to Nynaeve's relationship with Moghedien, I think my favorite part of this chapter is when Nynaeve compares herself to Moghedien, thinking about how Nynaeve is thinking about herself, how she's so much of a coward that she could only strike and exert this power over somebody else when she's sure that she has outmatched her opponent, when she's sure that her opponent doesn't have a means of escape or striking back at her.
Right.
And she thinks that that's exactly how Moghedien has been described to her, right? Only willing to fight if she knows that she could win it. And
Yes.
if there's any uncertainty, she's going to run away, which is actually just normal self-preservation. Honestly, Nynaeve is kind of seeing this in a really dark light. Like, oh, this is really creepy. I'm really like Moghedien, which they do have these parallels where there's a seed of these traits in Nynaeve that could have developed, but they didn't really. Right. And I think that, I mean, Moghedien is really just smart at self-preservation, which is why she is the Forsaken that lasts the longest throughout the series and doesn't ever have to be reborn in a different body. Now, she does, Moghedien has control over her with the Korsuvra for a while and stuff like that, so she definitely gets some consequences for screwing up, but at the same time, I mean, she lasts until well on the battlefield in the last battle and glamours herself to look like, not glamours herself, that's an Aswoff term probably. She does a mask of mirrors to look like Demandred. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think it's just a healthy dose of self-preservation to act that way, to only fight if you think you could actually win. And we see actually most animals do this. They tend to not fight if there's a large size difference between them a lot of times. Now there's definitely exceptions, but they could see, okay, this animal's clearly not a threat to me. I can just flex the fact that I'm bigger and more intimidating and kind of end the fight before it begins. But they're going to be more likely to fight when it's not obvious who's the stronger or more dominant one, and they need to duke it out physically and see how it turns out. So actually, maybe that's just the opposite of what I was trying to say. I'm going to probably delete that.
I don't know. We'll think about it. We might make some sense of it and circle back to it. But.
If it fits, I'll leave it in there. But I think I just said that backwards. But I can't really figure that out right now. I think I screwed it up. We'll see. Right, I'll have the editor deal with it.
Yes. But you do have it correct that both of them tend to not get into a fight unless they believe they can win it, unless they believe they completely have that upper hand. True. And I had never really thought of it before until we've done this podcast of just how much a bookend set matchup that Nynaeve is for Moghedien. We knew they were equal in the power. We found that out back in Tanchico. But again, this... I would say, equal in many ways, yet opposite, not just the strength of the power, but again, Moghedien wants to run away and hide. Nynaeve is going to jump right in the middle of something to protect those she loves, not herself. She does think of herself as somewhat of a coward, and Moghedien thinks of herself as a coward, yet they respond to that differently. But they both have many of the same, I guess, instincts or drives. They respond to those instincts differently. But I think they are, just, I would say, just polar opposites, yet very, very equal. Which is probably why they bump heads so many times in this series, because they really do. Now, with all of the things that Moghedien has done in her lifetime, back in the Age of Legends and during the War of Power, the terrible things she's done, and really we see a lot of terrible things that the Forsaken endure, the things they've had done to them, and they endure that for the sake of what they believe will give them eternal life from the Dark One. They I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how to put this into words. It's almost like they relish torture. They're very much into that, or many of them are. Yet the thing that breaks Moghedien's spirit here is when Nynaeve thinks of basically spanking her with a belt, and she starts remembering when she stole a pie just right after she'd braided her hair. The women's circle had decided she was old enough to be a woman. One of her friends dared her to steal one of these little pies, and she got caught, and she got strapped. And so she's imagining that punishment on Moghedien, and that breaks Moghedien into tears. It makes her quit fighting Nynaeve and decide to go on into the battle, engage Ravine, even if it means their death. That's the thing that broke her spirit. And I'm sitting there thinking,
it's kind of ridiculous. Just like the Semirog later.
Yes.
The same thing happens.
Right. It's like, of all the things in the world that you use to break somebody, I don't think that would be enough to do it. maybe it was the humiliation as much as the pain. I don't know. But just the fact that she found herself so completely under Nynaeve's control that, she might as well break now or it would get worse. I don't know. It seems a little unbelievable to me. But it's still, it's not a bad part of the story. It just shows me Robert Jordan really enjoyed spankings more than I do. I never...
Really, though? It's everywhere.
Yeah. To me, it's, I received plenty of them as a child. I deserved more than what I got, but I never saw it as anything sensual or or any form of torture or any of these things. But it was, it's odd. It is all throughout the story, though. Now,
yeah.
And here's another note, just because we haven't really gotten off topic much today. When Moghedien when Moghedien tries to take her collar off, of course it brings this intense nausea, and she's over there dry heaving. But she's in Tel'aran'rhiod. If you get sick at Tel'aran'rhiod, wouldn't it be possible just to keep throwing up stomach contents never hitting that point of the dry heaves? Because as long as you imagine there's food in your stomach, it would never stop.
Or maybe somebody could will that for you.
Yes.
I don't know which one is worse. I really don't know which one is worse to experience. I haven't vomited in so long, and I hate it so much.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, that's something I fight very much myself.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, I guess because that was her expectation after she'd thrown up 2 or 3 times, there's nothing left except the dry heaves. But I just thought of that later. I thought, well, what would happen if you if you kept thinking that would you just keep going or not? I don't know. Again, I wonder about some very odd things. They just don't all make it to the podcast, thankfully.
Yeah. So you noted a couple of small, funny things about this chapter, and one of them, for me, is that Nynaeve is too good at Tel'aran'rhiod in these 2 chapters we just finished, compared to the last times we saw her there. I mean, she's now judging other people for outfits changing too fast, and she's able to quickly jump to a town that she's barely remembers, and she's able to, do all these ridiculous things like conjure fork root, and it's just kind of, she's overpowered in Tel'aran'rhiod now. When did this happen? She was fumbling around in there, afraid. And I guess maybe without the fear that Moghedien is going to stumble upon her now, she can just, explore a lot more and really flex what she can do there. I don't really understand. Right. Or maybe there's supposed to have been a little more growth in Tel'aran'rhiod visits that were off screen that we know happened, and that she would kind of jump out of when she got scared and stuff like that on the ship, or maybe since she's been in Saladar as well when she's been training Swan. So I don't know, it just feels like all of a sudden she's very adept at it, and we didn't really see the training montage. I guess one happened.
Yeah, maybe it was a combination of it, like you said, the fear being gone, so she can explore a little more, feel more in control, because she's not always having to look over her shoulder. She just looks at the, in her mind, and she knows where Moghedien is and what she's doing. But also, she has spent some time teaching other people Tel'aran'rhiod, teaching the Aes Sedai and so on. And to me, at anything I do, I am far more adept at it when I'm teaching someone else. Or I grow far more adept at it because they ask questions I wouldn't think of, and it causes me to question other things about the material I'm teaching. And being there to compare yourself to someone else, you have to feel like you're better at it to teach someone, especially if you have a little bit of an ego problem. And Nynaeve just might occasionally have a little bit of a problem with pride and ego. So yeah, maybe she has forced herself to step out and do more now because she's having to show other people. And then again, maybe it just made the story work out better. I don't know.
Those are pretty much all my points about this chapter. Do you have anything else?
One thing that that I saw in this that, again, I like about Nynaeve is when she and Moghedien crept up the stairs, they see, across the room there is Ravine. They can tell from his expression that he is about to attack Rand. He's kind of, I guess, in a blind spot. Rand can't see him, and he's ready to spring his trap. And she just attacks him with Moghedien's power, but she attacks him with flame. And she didn't have a backup plan. She didn't think, well, I'm going to, do this and then run, dodge, hide, or anything. It was just flat out attack. Now, part of that, I think, was what we've talked about before, this desire to protect and save her friends, even, if she has to literally throw herself into the line of fire to do it. But part of it is exactly what Birgitta did for her in the last chapter. Just, okay, I don't really have a plan, but I'm going to take an action. I'm going to distract them because I trust you will have a plan. That was almost exactly what Birgitta told her. And so Nynaeve turns it around. She does the same thing for Rand. And she can't see Rand, but she knows he's there because she saw Ravine watching him. But, she just attacks and trusts that Rand will do what Rand does. Mm-hmm. And that was very bold and very courageous of her. As much as, as the last chapter ended with Birgitta laughing at her and saying, I'm ashamed to be with a coward like you, because she knew that Nynaeve really would not kill Moghedien. Birgitta leaves Tel'aran'rhiod laughing about that. But here we see Nynaeve is no coward. Again, she's not going to take a life if she can help it. She's not going to do that to herself, but she will put herself in danger to protect a friend. Even when there's no backup plan, she doesn't know what's going to happen next. It's just, let's try to kill him. Let's try to stop him. Let's try to do something to protect Rand. And I like that about her. And her attack didn't work, but the distraction did work, and that was all it took to take care of Ravine, or to let Rand take care of Ravine. But she didn't know that when she attacked Ravine. She just, jumped in there very Birgitta-like. Well, I'm going to distract him, and I trust you'll come up with something. and it did work in both counts. But yeah, I like that. I like that level of trust in friends. I hope my friends trust me that much. I absolutely do not trust any of my friends that far. But I hope they can have that level of trust in me.
Nope. I hope not. I don't want that pressure.
Right.
Here, you'll figure something out. No, I won't. Somebody, please help me.
I won't go to a restaurant without a plan as far as when we're leaving, where we're going. You know, much less go into battle for someone with no plan.
Right.
Well, that does it for this episode. I hope all of you will join us next time for episode 16, when we'll delve into, finally, another book, The Lord of Chaos. We'll begin with a prologue and chapter 8.
Wheel of Mind is written by Lajara and Giskel and produced by me, Lajara. Our original theme music was composed by Wendigo. You can find his new Lairs EP on SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube, and those links will be in the description. There are neither beginnings nor endings to the turning of the Wheel of Mind, but this is an ending. To catch a beginning next time an episode drops, subscribe to Wheel of Mind on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, or Spotify. You can also find our episodes on YouTube under the channel name Lajara Dane. That's LaJaraDayne. To leave feedback, rate and review on whichever platform you use to listen to us, or contact us at lajaradane@gmail.com or at mind_wheel on Twitter. To support the show, subscribe to us on Patreon by visiting patreon.com/wheelofmind.